Hi, I'm Ralph Preston, and we're back again with another Stroke Buddy Stroke Survivor Support Group meeting. And today we're going to talk a little bit about maximizing your recovery through the proper use of or utilization of neuroplasticity, a concept that we're all familiar with, but I'm not sure everybody knows as much about implementing as they do as to what it is. And we're lucky today to have Dr. Samantha Amadeo, and she's a neurophysical therapist, and she's going to talk on this subject. So I'll get quiet and let her do so. Welcome, Samantha, and thank you for taking the time
Thanks,
to share
Ralph.
with us.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm very excited to be here. This is actually my first podcast with you and partaking in the stroke support group. I've been a member on your Facebook for about a month or so, maybe a little longer than a month. Uh, and I've never been able to actually sit on a live call. So this is my first one too. So uh, it's all good, positive things today. I'm excited to be here. And thank you all for joining us. And thank you to anyone who watches afterwards. Of course, you can stop me whenever we're going. If you have any questions, I'm gonna make it as interactive as possible, okay? All right, so I'm gonna share my screen. A little PowerPoint here, but it's nothing crazy. Where I really just wanted to have a couple of talking points. It almost will just remind me to mention things. So really the point of all of this is to speak about neuroplasticity and have you all understand really what it is, why it's so important, and how we can use it. So that linking between what neuroplasticity is and how we use it, not just as physical therapists, but as stroke survivors, how you can use it in your everyday life to maximize your recovery after stroke, even years post-stroke. Before we get started, I just wanted to give a little bit of an introduction about myself. So I'm Dr. Samantha Amadeo. I'm a physical therapist. I received my board certification in neurologic physical therapy a few years ago. And I've kind of been all over the place with different positions that I've taken over the years. I've worked with adults in inpatient rehab. I've worked in acute care, so in like your typical hospital stay, home health. I've also worked with people, pediatric patients, amputees, veterans. So I really have dipped my toes in many pools. But a huge part, a huge thing that I recognize through my time with patients and something I've shown to Ralph and why I developed my business, NeuroThrive, is because of the lack of access to care so many people have. And what, Ralph has done with the Stroke Buddies group and the podcast and all of that really reflects my mission as well. And that's why I feel so honored to be here today and work with all of you, because this is something that a lot of people don't get from their therapists, from their doctors. The way healthcare is right now, it's very rushed. So it it or you just don't have good follow-up. There's the holes, unfortunately, that just happen. And following stroke, you may even have more difficulty understanding, and you need more time to understand and process, or repetition to understand. So that's why I developed NeuroThrive, so that I'm able to provide care and education to patients worldwide through telerehab and Facebook groups and social media. I also have my Instagram for that. And then I do love teaching. So for a few years now, after I received my neurologic specialty, I have been teaching other physical therapists to become neurologic specialists as well through a study group and through my educational Instagram, which is Mind Over Matter. So if anyone's looking to check things out, there's a lot of good information over there as well, but it is more so geared toward the therapist. There are some equipment recommendations and things you can do. So it may be a little not as like patient-friendly language, but if you have any questions or concerns, you could always reach out to me and I could explain it to you. Okay. So to start off, what is neuroplasticity? And it really just is that our brains have this amazing ability to reorganize and make new connections every day. So that's saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Yes, you definitely can. The brain is constantly changing and constantly learning, and we can use that after recovery, after stroke for recovery. We really can take advantage of the brain's amazing ability to do this. So what it really means is that it's changeable, right? So for instance, I have written here, if we work hard at something, it's going to make the brain stronger when we're learning about that connection. Or, if we're not really into something, we don't really care about it. Think about a topic in school back in the day that you really hated. The minute you took the test, that stuff was out your brain, right? It just didn't stick because you didn't really need it. Versus something that you really, really love to do, you get really good at. And one of my favorite analogies to use is driving somewhere familiar versus driving somewhere unfamiliar. So if I think about me going to my best friend's house, I could tell you all the back roads, when the traffic is bad. I know where the speed cameras are in New York City that I have to slow down for. I can tell you really exactly where it is and best times to get there. Versus if I'm going to somewhere new, a new restaurant, I really have to pay attention. It's something that my brain is not good at. This is something I really have to work on. So something that I've done a million times before, driving to my friend's house, I'm good at, right? My brain has a strong, strong connection there versus something that I haven't done before. It's definitely a weaker connection or weaker pathway in my brain that I can work on and get better with time. Does that all make sense? A little background on what it really is? Okay. So now with that, we have what's called the 10 principles of neuroplasticity. And this is really like the rules or understanding how we can use neuroplasticity to our advantage. How can we actually use it to make changes occur? So there's 10 that we can touch on. I'll go through each of them, but I've marked in red the really important ones for physical therapy and for recovery in general. So I'm sure you've all heard this use it or lose it, right? If you don't actually practice something, you don't actually do it, you're not going to keep that skill. So if you're I'm even thinking like hands-on skills as a physical therapist. If I don't work with people with stroke all the time, I'm not going to be good at working with people with stroke because that motor memory isn't there. So if you don't use it, you'll lose it. Then there's the use it and improve it. So when you do use something, you get better and better at it, right? So that's that practice makes perfect, basically. So if the more you use a skill, the more you do something, the better at it you're going to get. Just like with the driving the car, right? The more times that you go to that one place, the more familiar it becomes. Now, these get a little bit more tricky to understand as we go a little bit further on. So specificity. Now, this, easy as I can make it seem, is that if you want to get good at a task, you have to do that exact task. So, for instance, let's talk about walking, right? You want to get better at your walking, you want to walk farther, you want to walk faster. The best way to do that is to walk, or the best way to get better at singing is to sing. You can study all the background information, you can strengthen your legs and sitting, you can strengthen your legs laying down, you could work on your balance. That'll show some carryover to the skill. But the really best way to get the skill better is to do that exact skill. So you really can't get good at riding a bike until you ride a bike. So that's task specificity. Any questions so far on 1, 2, and 3? Okay. Number 4 is repetition matters. So the more we do something, the better at it we're going to get. So you can't just do something. You can't just walk once a week for 10 feet, twice a week for 100 feet. You're not going to get better at it, right? Because there's not enough repetition, right? I think there's that saying that you need to do something at least 10,000 times to become an expert at it, right? So the more repetition that you have on that skill, the more you walk, the more you use your affected hand, the more you challenge your balance, more and more repetition, the better you're going to get at it, and the better and the stronger that connection in the brain is going to get. Now, intensity. This is one that can be very difficult to tackle in therapy because of fear of the therapist, feeling tired, not being sure how hard you're actually able to push yourself. But we want to make sure intensity, think of that as challenge. You want the challenge of the task to be hard. You're doing a scale of 0 to 10. We really want you on 60 to 80%. That's 6 to 8 out of 10. So if I'm asking you, Ralph, how hard do you feel like you're working right now? And he says, a 3. Oh, we can go more. He doesn't need a rest. He's not sweating. He's not huffing and puffing. He's not working too hard. But if I see him physically getting tired, it's really hard for him to continue. And I ask him, Ralph, how hard are you working? And he says, I'm like at an 8 out of 10. I'm going to have to stop soon. That's that intensity we want. So, you're going for a little stroll in the park and you're kind of relaxing. That's not intense. You got to walk hard, faster, make things really challenging to get that neuroplasticity to change. Now, time. So I like to take time and age with a grain of salt because it's not to make anyone who has been far out from their stroke or your age to feel like you can't make improvements. But the farther out you are from that event, so your stroke, brain bleed, brain injury, whatever it may be, and the older you are, makes neuroplasticity a little more challenging to achieve. Not to say that it's not possible, but it's harder for, let's say you're trying to teach a little kid something, they're like little sponges, right? That happens in 2 seconds. The older you get, you're kind of stuck in your habits. The farther you out from stroke, the less spontaneous recovery we get. So if you should really try to take advantage of time. So, starting today, don't start in a year. That's more of my mentality versus, oh, you're 5 years out of your stroke. There's going to be very little change. Not a good positive mentality, right? It's kind of negative. So we just want to kind of take advantage of the time that we have now. We're at our youngest we'll ever be and do what we can now, right? Now, salience, this is kind of a funny word. I remember learning salience in school and like thinking like, what is that word? This is really just, does it matter to me, right? Does what I'm doing actually reflect what I want to get better at? Is it something that I'm passionate about or that's meaningful to me? Say you're working with a therapist and you're standing and you're kind of bored. Boredom, oh my gosh, you're not going to make any change because you're bored. You're not locked into this. Versus when someone walks in, they say, I want to stand today. That is something so meaningful, right? They really want to stand. I want to be able to stand so I can brush my teeth at the sink. That's something that we know that's super meaningful for them. So it's more likely that the brain is going to change and adapt and build stronger networks because it's something meaningful. Versus think about back when you're in school, like I said earlier, and you're learning a subject you really hate. You are less likely to know it and remember it because you just don't care about it. So this is why it's so important. I mean, I'm kind of mushing into things that we'll talk about a little later, but to have your own goals and to work on those goals with the therapist or with yourself. So say you want to golf. Let's freaking golf. Like, why are we just sitting here doing standing exercises? Let's get a golf club in our hand and start to swing it and see how you're able to keep your balance while you're swinging the golf club. That salience to your life and meaning is going to make you have a stronger connection and more neuroplastic changes. Now, the last two, transference and interference. So transference is when you work hard at something and you're perfecting a skill, let's say just standing up from a chair. There's sometimes a what we call like I call it like transferability. That skill can be transferred to very similar other things. So If I'm practicing standing up from a chair that I'm on right now, I may be getting better at standing up from my toilet or getting up from a bench in the park. It can transfer and go across a larger span of the actual skill that you're doing. So you can see it says practicing one skill can improve, can cause improvement in another skill, something that's related to it. And finally, interference is that if you are, this is like if you form a bad habit, it's even harder to get rid of that bad habit and make a good habit. So if you are compensating, so say, I'm sure you all have heard of constraint-induced movement therapy, right? CIMT, where they don't let you use your unaffected side, right? They don't let you use that good arm, and they make you really only use the affected arm for things. So you're forced to use that. But, say everyday life, it's just easier and quicker to use the arm that's stronger or the leg that's stronger when you're going up the stairs versus using the affected leg that's harder to go up the stairs. When you start getting into a habit of using compensatory techniques, so something that's gonna just help you kind of get through the skill without actually strengthening your weaknesses, that can make it a little more difficult to have changes because we got to kind of kick the bad habit before we work on a good habit. Does anyone have any questions on the 10 principles? No? Okay. You could also, I only see a few of you at the top because I like kind of have to scroll through. So you could just unmute yourself if you're muted and just blurt out whatever you need to say.
I've got one question.
Sure.
I was like in regards to interference. Um, I've got little to no feeling on one side of my body, my affected side. And it also used to be it's my right side, which I am right-handed. Now I need to do compensatory techniques and I live alone with a couple cats. So uh how does that play in there? Because I mean I can't even move my fingers. I can move my thumb just a little bit. So I was curious, I mean, I, I haven't noticed that I've been able to get any feeling back. I mean, I'll like tickle my foot. I get some, reflex reactions and stuff like that because I can feel a little bit enough where my brain is getting that. So I was just curious how that comes into play. It's my stroke was 2016 January, so I'm uh 9 years away from so that anyway. What are your
Yes.
thoughts?
So this is, I mean, we'll go into this a little bit further, but this is why an individualized plan and having a therapist, it's hard to take something off the shelf and say, this is perfect for you because it's different for everybody. But if there's different levels of task intensity or challenge. So maybe the things that you need to do every day right now are too difficult for that hand, right? So you need to compensate for certain things, right? So if you're kind of low level for the ability to like open a water bottle, per se, with that hand, of course you're going to compensate and you're going to use the other hand. But say there's something like maybe you got a little bit of shoulder movement and you're able to maybe wipe the countertop or brush crumbs off the countertop. That's an easier skill than using very fine motor to open a cap. So maybe we use the affected side in an easier task where we'd actually be successful, right? You want to have some success, right? Like maybe out of 5 times, you want to be able to successfully do it 3 out of if you're trying to do it. So when there's a task where you're like, I could probably do it with my affected arm, but you know what? I'm just going to use my unaffected arm because it's just quicker and easier. That's more so where we're talking about interference. Of course, there's going to be things that are super difficult that you just have to. It's just real life gets in the way, right? Not
Okay.
everything can be a chance You can't make your whole life, I'm doing rehab right now. I always try to explain there's things we do for recovery and there's things that we do for safety and function, right? So like you said, you live alone, you don't have any help in the house. You have to be able to do certain things, right?
Yep.
So of course you have to do what works best. But then maybe on the times that you do have time to work a little bit more on the arm, that's when you challenge it and you try to stay away from using the unaffected arm. Does that make sense?
Totally. Thank
Okay.
you.
Of course. Any other questions on that? Anything to add?
Well, I mean, functional therapy, using it in everyday tasks is great, but the issue is always like one Kevin's got, you got to get it going a little bit before you can build on it.
Yes,
So
exactly.
a lot
And
of
it's,
people, particularly with their hands, struggle with getting it going.
yeah, the hand typically comes back last. Always think about distance from the brain too. The fingertips are the farthest from the brain. So not to be as direct, but really just think about the nerve, the length of the nerve to get to the hand. It's a long connection. It kind of fizzle out before it gets there is like an easy way to describe it. So typically you see recovery from proximal or close to the body to distal away from the body. Now I saw Brian, you raised your hand if you want to speak to something.
Yes, as a matter of fact, one thing my wife and I have done as a great way of practice are basic necessities on a daily basis, from folding laundry to preparing meals and doing dishes, making sure that both hands are constantly active and only relying on, say, the unaffected hands for something more crucial, like not breaking a dish or breaking a glass and causing a great deal of chaos in the middle of doing everything else. But generally,
Yes.
trying to work both hands at the same time, basically one hand helping to teach the other hands to relearn the skill or to participate in relearning the skill.
Yeah, I like that idea of participation because something like folding clothes or, even folding a piece of paper, that affected side can almost help to be the stabilizer, right? So maybe it's not doing the most of the movement, but it could be holding down the shirt or it can be holding down a piece of paper as you fold over the other side. So it is participating in the skill and being a part of the skill, but maybe not doing the bulk of the work. And that's just the first piece of the puzzle, and then you build from there. So it's always really starting where you're at and seeing how can we incorporate and use what you do have to complete the skill, right? Always try to think of what do I actually have? What can I actually do instead of thinking what I can't do? Having that positive mentality is going to make a huge difference too.
One thing I remember a great deal from therapy was simply interlacing your fingers.
Yeah.
They said, have your fingers in your right hand, hug the fingers on your left hand, and we say, welcome back, let's get the show on the road. And so I do that whenever I feel my left hand getting twitchy. I grab it with the right hand and say, hey, wake up, hold hands, and let's work together.
Yeah. It's many patients describe the feeling after a stroke almost like they're disconnected from that body part now. It's like it reminds me a lot of amputees where they lose a limb and they feel like they're maybe the limb is still there, but it's not how it should be, like there's some weird disconnect. This arm doesn't feel like mine. It just feels like I'm carrying along heavy weight or something behind me, or my foot doesn't feel right. So teaching the brain, like, no, your hand is okay. Your hand is here. It's just healing. It's have you guys ever seen like neurotherapy or mental imagery? That's a way of really calming the brain. It's telling the brain, that hand is good. That hand works. It's there. It has the potential. It's just sleepy right now. I like to use like all these little terms where, it's just taking a rest for a moment, but it is there because that course of anxiety too can really impact the ability to do something. I don't know if you've ever tried to jump into a pool and you're like, oh my gosh, why can't I just jump? Why can't I just do it? It's right there. I know I'm okay, but it's like that it holds you back from actually being able to do something. So having that, I think that's an awesome way to think about it, Ryan, is, using that positive talk and that almost calming touch to that side to relax tone or, kind of bring that body part back to you when you feel like you
Right.
lost it.
As
Well,
in,
Go
as a
ahead.
fact, one of my nephews even pointed out to a movie he just saw with his friends. He said, "Oh, I understand now, Uncle Ryan." He's like, "Fear really is the mind killer," which is a line from the movie Dune or something. So he says, if you put your mind to it, you know, the mind will lead the body because the mind is the one in control.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
you have to convince yourself sometimes that is the case.
Yeah. You're completely right.
I found in my recovery and with helping other people that engaging the opposite side, whether it's hands or whatever, particularly with hands and arms, bilateral therapy. Dr. Hetzler could tell you the exact amount, but I believe it's somewhere around 10 or 15% of the brain signals stay on the same side. And, so doing things like when you're in the shower, we kind of automatically know to use both sides. So like when you're washing your hair, you can try and do the exact same thing. Your brain will want to do the exact same thing if you're scratching or rubbing or whatever. Same with I first got involved with it when I was trying to roll my fingers again. First of all, the healing side, the teaching side can show the healing side what it's supposed to be doing. I suppose that's a mild form of mental imagery,
Yeah.
getting the idea set in your brain as to what the task is. And what I would do would be I found that, could easily roll them on my unaffected side. My affected side was a mess. And what I did was I tried rolling them both at the same time, and it worked a lot better on the affected side. So I would pattern 5 or 6 times and then try and do it on my own with my affected hand. When it fell apart, I'd go back to patterning. I'm not a big believer I'm a big believer in form in all ways. And because if you ignore form, you can develop bad habits. And I found bad habits are a lot harder to break than keeping them away in the first place.
Mhm. For sure. And
So, right.
the brain is connected, the two sides, right? You have two hemispheres. They are connected in the middle. So there's communication between the two sides. So there's actually studies that show that when there's an infarct or a lesion or an injury to one side, the other side almost fires more because it's trying to compensate. They kind of work in an equilibrium balance where one's the positive, one's the negative, and they kind of even it out. So if you lose one side, the other side tries to compensate. So they really do talk. So doing that bilateral in two hands, working right and left at the same time or using a mirror can really help strengthen not only the weaker side of the brain, but the connection between the sides so that communication can get stronger again. Okay.
I have a question.
Sure.
Yeah, so I'm dealing with hypertonicity and some spasticity. I just recently started walking in my pool. The local Y has a really great pool, and I find that I get much faster in the pool than I can with a walker. Um, and what are some exercises that you would recommend? And what are I get excited. I'm so pleased after I get over the shock of the cold water. Um, and I'm now just walking lengths of the pool. I did a half hour the first time. I started cutting back because you have no idea how much you're working. And by the end of it, my wife said to me just the other day, I was watching you walk as I was getting our pool in the Y has a ramp and railing, so it's great. And she said, you're barely walking. And I said, that's me walking. I'm not falling. That's me walking, and that's what it looks like. So, what are some great practices that I could take on in the pool other than back and forth, doing the lengths?
Ryan, do you want to answer? Or do you want, I can answer first and then do you want to, okay. So I'm just going to describe the pool situation, why you probably are doing so well in the pool and why the pool can be so helpful for a lot of people. It's, you're not going to fall. Remember you said you're not falling, you're walking. That loss of anxiety, right? You don't have that fear in the pool because you trip, you slip, you're in the pool, you're safe, right? I mean, if you know how to swim or you're in something maybe 3 feet, 4 feet of water, you're not going to drown. So you feel comfortable. So you're confident there. So you're excited, you're confident. So that pushes you to try and push yourself harder, right? Then you get a little bit of buoyancy. So there's less weight through the body. So it can make things a little bit easier as well, versus your full body weight on your affected leg. And then in addition to that, the pool is calming, so that can reduce your spasticity and your tone. And the water provides good input. So that resistance you get from the water pushes and gives your body more information. So you have a better sense of where you are in space compared to when you're just in air. So you're getting the compression from the water, the feeling of the water. You feel your joints more when you're there. So it's giving you a lot of input and information about where your body is and also providing that buoyancy, that lack of fear, all of that. So it's a huge positive to practice these things in the pool. I would challenge things like your intensity. So trying to make things, trying to do things for a longer period of time, taking less breaks, and maybe working in the more shallow part of the pool so you have less information from the water and you have less buoyancy helping you with weight, like off weighting your body. Does that make sense? Where you don't really have to do anything hugely different, but you can change the way that you're in the pool to make it more challenging and to track how much more you're able to do before you get equally as fatigued as before.
I
Yeah,
found, go ahead, Jeff, sorry.
just um, practically the whole pool is no more than 4 feet deep,
Okay.
and maybe at the shallowest 3.5 feet. Um, I know there are some aerobics, aqua aerobic classes they have. It's been moved to another city, so I
Mm.
can't access that. But I'm wondering if there probably is some kind of video that would
I
be
can look up some videos for you, or we can chat further afterwards. Yeah, go ahead, Ralph.
I'll wait my turn. Well, Josh, I'm trying to work on one. I got turned down by a hospital system, but we're going to do an end run around it. I've taken 7 or 8 people to the pool to do pool therapy, so I can give you some ideas on some different things that you can do in the pool other than just walking back and forth.
yeah.
But the thing I wanted to say was I found that fear occupies a good bit of your brain. I find that when I'm afraid, I can't do simple tasks like for example, okay, I'm looking at my steps out here, so I can go right up the steps without a railing, no problem. If I put things in both my hands, I don't do as well. It's not because my feet don't operate as well. It's because I don't have, even though there's no railing, I feel like, well, if I stumble or something, I couldn't put my hands down. When my hands are occupied, fear gets introduced somewhat. I mean, I'm not like scared, but it's occupying a part of my brain. And I find that, one thing about the pool is, and you mentioned it, is that it's a safe environment. So, you feel you don't have as much fear. And therefore, I think you've got more brain I mean, this is unscientific in explanation and terminology, but I find in that you have more brain for the task if you don't have fear. If I could eliminate if I could figure out one thing about stroke recovery, it'd be how to get rid of fear, because then you would have all your brain all the time to apply it to the task.
Yeah. And you could always do any other activities that you're struggling with too, like try to do some squats in the pool. You could even try to do some, resisted arm swings and really big marches, backwards walking, sideways walking. All those things that you do on ground, you
Yeah,
could do that in the pool. There's even
Right.
thank you.
weights.
Thank you.
And
Yes.
I was gonna say that, I don't know how your form is for walking, but the pool is such a good place to work on walking form, because you do kind of have that extra time in between bringing the foot from the back to the front, and you can really focus on coming off of that big toe, rolling off that big toe. So you really get good walking time to work on that walking form.
Great. I have one request. If we don't need the slide anymore, then we can all see
We
each
do.
other.
She's not done.
Let me see. I've got a couple of like 2 or 3 more, and then we could all just chit chat. Would that work?
Sure.
Okay. Let me see.
You're the
Yeah, there's
driver.
literally 3 slides. So we'll go through them, and then I'll unshare the screen so we can see everyone's nice faces. So these are just, the principles of neuroplasticity applied to rehab. So I've mentioned some of this, so I'll skip past a few of it. So using that use it or lose it, right? So I kind of mentioned this when we were talking before about using your strong arm when you need to, but then trying to get recovery in the affected arm when you have that time to try something more challenging, using compensatory mechanisms as you need it, but then being able to actually foster recovery when possible. Because, if you're not using the affected side, it's not going to get better, right? We want to make sure we're using it, or else it's just going to get more and more dormant. Now, task specificity. So are you practicing that exact task? So like Josh was mentioning about walking in the pool is a perfect way to practice walking, right? He's still doing walking. It's just in a different environment. It's a safer environment. It gives you all that important information versus if he were just to sit and do some leg strengthening or standing balance exercises. You're not going to get the best benefit out of it until you're actually doing the walking skill. Now, repetition, making sure you're doing the task enough times to make a difference. So I like to put repetition and intensity together, because I always say, let's just try to repeat this until you can't repeat it anymore. So say you're practicing sit to stand transfers, right? You're trying to stand up and down from a chair because you're having a hard time with that. Just see how many times you can get through them, because then you're getting huge repetition. Maybe instead of doing 3 sets of 10 and you're taking a rest at 10, you get to 22. And now you're fatigued because you have to stop, and you're getting huge repetition. Same thing with walking. So say you set up kind of you're on your block, right? On your street, or you're in your house. Have a couple of checkpoints where you have a chair that you can sit if you have to, but just walk. See how far you can walk until you can't walk anymore. Get that as many steps as possible. And when you can't walk anymore, you're hitting intensity, right? Because you're too fatigued, versus saying, I'm going to do a minute. And then maybe after the minute, you're not really tired. So really try to gauge what that full capacity is, and then try to push it at more and more. And the more you practice the skill, the more likely you are to do it outside of your actual therapy. So there's go for it. Go ahead. Who is about to talk? Nope. Okay. So there have been studies that show that when we get more stepping in physical therapy, you get more stepping during your session, there's more stepping outside of therapy, which is the most important thing, right? You're not living your life in therapy, you're living your life outside of therapy. So if you do 1,500 steps in therapy instead of 500 steps, you're more likely to do more steps when you're home. So you actually do have that carryover, that transfer to real life.
Mm.
Now, also intensity, something that I would like to maybe do on another talk is how do we even measure intensity? So there's many therapists now and patients have the access to heart rate monitoring, where if you're able to get your resting heart rate and you have a range of, okay, this is really where I can go to be the safest and also push myself to a high intensity. We know you're making your heart work and we know you're making your brain work to the high intensity that we need for recovery. And finally, is that skill meaningful to you? So we want to make sure that we're actually doing the skill that means something to us. Ralph, did you have something to say?
I was just going to say, I totally agree with the intensity. As somebody who went at it pretty intensely myself. Just was going to add again, I stopped when my form got bad
Yes.
and went back to it. So I guess I just want to reiterate that form is real important for not learning bad habits. Also, somebody like Josh has got to be somebody with extreme spasticity or hypertonicity has to be careful about intensity. I don't experience that, but from what Josh and other people I've talked to who do experience that say is it's really hard to gauge what level of intensity you can engage in one day because you don't really become aware of it until you're feel like toast the next day. Is that a fair way of explaining it, Josh?
Yeah, it's always, you never know. You could feel horrible when you take on doing something and your body performs fabulously, or you feel great and you burn out very early. You just really, or different
Yeah.
parts of the body are saying, "Hey, I'm asleep. Don't wake me up."
Yeah.
So
I think taking into consideration too, how we can measure intensity is different and not just like heart rates. So knowing your form is going may not show strain heart-wise, right, cardiovascularly, but it shows fatigue muscularly, right? So you're starting to lose form, your muscles are getting tired. That's showing that you're working hard, right? So once you start seeing that form lose, you know you're pushing yourself, take the rest. Same thing with spasticity or balance. If you're challenging your balance in something and you feel really, really unsteady, then you know that this is a challenging, intense task for you. So heart rates is a great thing to do. There's huge and huge research that supports that when we get into really high heart rate zones, that helps with neuroplasticity and changes, whether it be our walking speed, our gait, how more normal or efficient our gait is. But we can measure intensity in a world of ways. Like I said, like what Ralph was saying, form is a perfect way of measuring intensity. Once you start seeing the form go, you know that you're working really hard, and that's when you need to take the rest. And that's why, moving on, this is why this is important for everything to be individualized, right? So we know every person is different. Every stroke is different. People have different levels of endurance and abilities. Some people are in a wheelchair. Some people wear braces or use different devices. Some people have comorbidities and concerns, different, feelings of what's important for them to target and different levels of support, right? So maybe someone has a caregiver that's 24/7 that can work with them all the time. And now having an extra person there is great, right? So you can challenge yourself a little harder. Or like Josh, he has access to a pool. So being able to have access to a pool, that can kind of give us a new avenue for his programming. But it's hard to take these cookie cutter approaches when every single person is different, right? Even if you have a stroke in the same spot, in your brain, you had the same comorbidity, same age, you're still going to present differently because we're all in different environments, right? We all have different past experiences that are going to impact our abilities in the future. So all of this has to be considered when we're making sure that we're also hitting those neuroplastic principles. So just think of all the things that we have to jumble to make sure that the program is right for you.
And I think you need to also learn body awareness and pay attention to what you're doing and how you're reacting to it.
Yeah.
Because you need to be an active participant in this. You know this as a therapist. You can't operate in a void if your client isn't interacting with you and giving you feedback. You only get the feedback from seeing them.
Yeah.
So anything you can do to learn about what works and what doesn't work for you, like in Josh's case, you know, with spasticity and hypertonicity, you have to learn where that sweet spot is, where you don't do too much that you cause yourself to not be able to do something in the next couple of days.
Yeah.
However, Josh and other people have also reported to me or discussed with me the fact that you can do the same thing one time and it will affect you, and you can do it another time and it doesn't affect you. So that sweet spot's kind of variable.
Yeah. I think that's kind of where it lends itself to knowing not just the person, but you have to have a good relationship with who you're working with and with yourself or whoever your caregiver or care partner is, where fitness trainer, whoever you're working with on these things is, you know, not just doing, but really evaluating how you're doing and how something feels and how it feels afterwards, because that's going to, it's not just this is what you do and just stick with it, right? So there's modifications as you go along, which will change by day for the person and way different changes depending, person to person. So that's that individualization that is so key to make sure that it's the perfect fit for you. Now I see we have a hand raised from Debbie.
Hi, I'm sorry I was late. I just have a question with regard to walking. I have right hemi and my hip, but my inner hip, it's almost like in my groin, is driving me mad. It's so sore. Um, I've obviously, because last week I looked after a friend's flat and I had to climb stairs. So I went down sideways and figured it out. So it was fine, but I could feel it was pulling. So I obviously overdid it last week. But with this, I have a bad right knee. So my right knee is not playing ball at the moment. It feels like if I try and weight bear, it starts shaking on me or almost like collapsing if I try and weight bear a bit much. And then shivering and shaking and everything. So I just want to find out, how long do I have to rest for, or is there something else I can do? I'm waiting for my physio to come back. He's been off sick, unfortunately. So what I've been doing is my own stuff, and I'm far from knowing what I should and shouldn't be doing. But I'm trying, just keeping mobile and keeping walking. And today I walked a fair amount in the garden, but it does get sore. So the knee has constant pain even when I'm sitting.
Yeah. So I would always think that, even though you're stroke survivors, you have every other body system that someone who isn't a stroke survivor has. So even if you didn't have a stroke and you exercise too much, you would have muscle soreness, right? Which is kind of what you're presenting with, right? Where you overdone it.
I
So
thought I was going mad.
yeah, have you tried just ice where you can just rest and
I
ice
can't
it?
use ice at the moment. It's too cold here where I am.
Okay.
It's
What about
freezing. It's winter.
What about some gentle massage in the area or light stretching?
Okay, that's an idea. But
Yeah, so
that was the thing. I'm not sure if I've actually like pulled it or just it's just a
not too
stroke.
much.
I have no idea.
So I would, what you can, is your therapist working within an office with other
No,
therapists?
he comes to me
He comes to you.
because I can't get to them at the moment, and I don't have someone at home to assist me. My mom lives with me, and she's 80 years old,
Okay.
and I try and avoid that as much as I can.
So in the meantime, the way that I would approach what you're handling is first have the idea that if you have muscle soreness following activities that's more than 48 hours or 48 to 72 hours, so that's 2 to 3 days afterwards, that shows you pushed it too much. So it's typical for you to have some soreness the day after, 2 days after, 3 days after. If it goes further than that, then you did too much, which is okay. That's how we learn, right? So the next time we know what our limit is. But in the meantime, taking it a little bit easier with weight-bearing activities, but know that you're not limited in like non-weight-bearing activities. So you can
Okay.
still do stretching and strengthening, sitting down, laying down. Even if you were to move your leg in different directions and you're not putting weight through it, say you're standing on the other leg and you're moving your affected leg, that's a way to exercise and work without actually weight bearing. Doing a bike, like a recumbent bicycle compared to walking. Walking is weight bearing. So you can try to scale it back and do easier exercises or work on the upper body. So you can still get good cardio by doing upper body stretches and like yoga poses using the core and the shoulders and the hips, where you're not pushing the body as you did before. You're not doing stairs again, but you're not doing nothing. So it's taking a rest and giving your body a moment to heal, but at the same time, not taking too much time off where you're going to have any regression. Does that make sense?
Thank you. Yes, it does.
You're
Thank you
welcome. You're
very
welcome.
much.
Josh, you have a question?
I have a
Yeah,
question. Oh,
let him go.
Okay, who wants to go first?
well, I have a perhaps what might be a simple question, and that's the difference between active versus passive movements. How effective are passive movements in which, say, someone else is moving your affected limb, or using your good limb to move your affected limb in triggering neuroplasticity?
So neuroplasticity really should be active. It depends on what you're trying to do with the passive movement. So passive movements are not bad. They're good for stretching. They're good for maintaining range of motion and preventing like a muscle contraction or muscle stiffness that's very hard to get back. And also good to show you so that you're able to visualize and feel the movement. So sometimes we can't move. Sometimes there's people who have complete flaccidity and they're not able to move their leg forward, and the therapist will bring their leg through the movement. And it's not that we're not going to get neuroplastic changes at all because you're not participating, but there's more to it than just the active movement because the person is feeling the leg move, they're seeing the leg move. So if you're just laying there and you're just like, blah, and letting the person move your leg for you, that's not going to do anything, right? Because you're not active in the movement. But if you're watching it and thinking open, close, or like you're doing what Ralph said, you're mirroring it with your unaffected side, that'll have some really good impact on neuroplastic changes because you're participating somehow in that passive range. Does that make sense, Bruce?
Yes.
Okay.
I can add a little something, and that is, one of the hardest things, particularly with hands, is to get something going. So, you can't engage in active. I completely agree that, you want to get to totally active voluntary movement and build on that. But if you don't have any movement at all, I use a combination of passive movement and mental imagery, or like you were saying, open, close. I also talk to it. Another verbal stimuli. So what I do is tell people, if you can't move something, you can start by moving it with your other with your unaffected side. But when you do that, you should engage in mental imagery and try and think about, okay, push, even though you're pushing your elbow up with your unaffected hand, you think, try and raise that arm, raise that arm, raise that arm. Just be thinking about it and visualizing it. And that's how I got some of my body parts going. And then eventually could do the bilateral type therapy. But if you don't have anything, it's hard to do 100% active. But that's obviously the goal.
So engaging in some way, even if it is passive, is what I would say.
Right. That's what I think. I'm not a physical therapist. I'm not a neurologist. I'm just somebody that paid attention to my recovery and the people that I tried to work with or
Yes,
did
you're
work
right.
with. All right.
Okay, so I'm just gonna quickly go to this next slide because it's the last one. Now these are just things that I want you to think of and be aware of when you're doing your recovery or you're doing rehab or you're doing exercises. Following a cookie cutter program is hard. We don't know if it fits everyone. So if you were to be following some sort of a cookie cutter program where you got a program off of the internet or you're watching a video, take it with a grain of salt where you remember that you're an individual who has a unique presentation and your own body and your own background and experience, that there may be things that you have to change or things that may not work for you. So it's harder to just follow a random program that's not made just for you. So just take that with a grain of salt. Also, if you're going into therapy and you're working on exercises that you can physically do on your own and you don't need guidance with, that's not good, right? Because the therapist should be challenging you, right? You're in a state where you have some really good help, expertise, and a second person there, period. So they should be able to guard you, make sure you don't fall, or hold your hand, or challenge you. They have all the cool equipment, or X, Y, and Z. So, if you're with them and you're kind of in the corner doing your own thing, that's not good therapy, right? So we want to challenge ourselves, especially when you have a therapist or a care partner, or you have a personal trainer at your disposal. You should be changing up exercises. Variability of a task also improves neuroplasticity. So when there's change, we're challenging ourselves. So if you have the same exercise all the time, it's not good. Unless we're increasing the challenge, if we're working on walking and we're making you walk farther, or we're walking with a more difficult device like a cane versus a walker, then that's awesome because we're increasing challenge. But you don't want to be doing the same thing all the time. There's no improvement when you do the same thing all the time. Sitting and lying to work on upright skills. If you're trying to get better at standing, this is that task specificity, right? The neuroplasticity principle of task specificity. If I'm trying to improve standing, why am I sitting? If I'm trying to get better at walking, why am I laying down, right? We want to actually do the skill. Not that there's no benefit to strengthening and really focusing on a specific muscle, but in the end, we want to make sure that we're being task specific when we're picking an exercise. Taking a rest that's not needed. Sometimes clinics or people, or, you just have, oh, you know what, I'm just going to take a rest. A minute feels good. Or 3 sets of 10, right? I'm going to rest after 10. Do you really have to rest after 10, or could you rest after 15? Like challenge yourself a little bit to really take the rest when you need the rest. And then your goals need to be made with you. You as an active participant you need to have that input, right? This is your recovery. You're the main character here. We want you to make the goals. So if there's a goal in your program that's made without you, how do we know that that goal is something that you actually want to achieve, right? So making goals with your therapist, with your care partner is super important because that's that motivation salience that we're looking for in neuroplasticity. So knowing what you need is, you know, taking a huge part of it and pulling it back, right? Because you're able to advocate for yourself. So when you know what you need, you can tell other people what you need from them. So that's how you can get the best care and the best outcomes. So now we're really just, I'll not share my screen. We could just see each other's faces and we could chit chat.
Josh, you had your hand up first, and then Kevin put his up. So go
Yeah.
ahead, Josh.
I got into a place where I started being taught, teaching myself with the support of my PT to walk with a cane. So I'm graduating from a walker to a cane. And then I was over medicated and started dealing with lightheadedness. And one morning, 4 weeks ago, my right leg gave way and I fell down. And it was also, I could by myself lift the walker and put it in a car or take it out, which we were very pleased
Wow,
about.
for you.
Yeah. And what's scary is walking without the walker around the car. And we were even looking at, there's a school that has a driving school that would actually test me to see how capable I am. So I've been really thrilled with my progress, and then I
Good.
fell. And my neck, it so messed me up. I'm getting away from being dizzy or lightheaded. I'd rather use that word. Dizzy means you're going to fall for me. And so I've been told to drink a lot of water. And it's been taking a long time, 4 weeks. I even started going to a chiropractor too, because I did more of that than physical therapy for years. So, but it really, my walking slowed down, even with a walker from the shock of having fallen. Um, my confidence, even with the walker, I'm just overly cautious.
Yeah.
Um,
I think this is that idea of recovery and just life in general is never linear, right? So you could be making great progress, and then there's something that is out of your control. You didn't fall because of strength. You didn't fall because of you were not careful. You fell because you're having an issue with your medication, right?
yeah,
And you felt weak and you fell, right? That's something out of your control. But it sets you back, right? You have a little dip. But that doesn't mean you can't keep going, right? Like me and Ralph kind of been explaining with the fear. You have a new little level of fear after a fall, a little extra caution, which is normal. You should be more concerned after a fall, right? You don't want to fall again. And the farther and farther out you get from it, the more confident you get. But I think knowing where you were and knowing that learning from the issues that you had with that fall and advocating for yourself to get a change in medication and to push back and know that it's possible to get back to the walking with the cane and using whatever tools you have, including good diet, good hydration, chiropractic skills, your aquatic therapy. You're using so many different things to push and advocate and get better yourself. Like that's more than half the battle. That's awesome. Really great.
thank you.
You're
I
welcome.
think a lot of us have had lots of experience falling, so
Yeah.
wanted to bring that into the conversation.
Kevin, did you?
Oh,
Oh,
sorry.
go ahead, Ralph.
I was going to say Kevin has his hand raised, but I didn't mean to interrupt you. We just both talked at the same time.
Go
Kevin,
ahead.
you got a question?
Well, yeah, and moreover, comment on some of the stuff in your slide. I mean, I think it's very, I've run into it a couple times, and even with Ralph, I run into it, is that, every stroke is different. And I've got an AFO, and I hear over and over again, oh, you want to get out of your AFO. You want to get better so that you don't need your AFO. But uh my doctor and my you know my my PT and everything say no. You need to be in your AFO. I've looked at it. I mean, I can walk without my AFO, but I'm very unstable. And I step on my toes, kind of roll over, and I have no feeling, right? And I had the tendon transfer surgery, and and that helps with the foot drop. But I can't move my ankle or my foot, and like I said, I can tickle my foot, I can get some reflex reactions, but so I can feel that. But one of the things specifically, and it goes back to your no cookie cutter programs, because yeah, every stroke is different. And you get to where there are some people on these groups that just start, ranting and raving, or not even get the commenting on, here's what you need to do. This is all you need to do, and you'll get to 100%, or you'll do this, and you'll so just because you you had a stroke, every, like you said, and like I've seen, every stroke is different. And I don't know when I'll ever get my AFO off. I mean, I've asked my doctor about adding, because I've got a hard plastic for my ankle, because my ankle needs that support. And like I said, yeah, at night I take it off and I can get around very slowly, but it's dangerous, especially because I'm all alone. So, you know, but every stroke is different. And I think, I just want people that maybe see this to really get that, just because someone says something, oh well, this is what you have to do. It's like, okay, but you haven't even looked at what's going on in my body, what has happened since uh that part of my brain died, and how my brain's trying to compensate since.
You're completely right. Yeah. And I think this kind of lends itself back to our conversation about compensation and recovery.
Yeah.
So, you know, AFOs are wonderful. I mean, assisted devices are wonderful. They give you the ability to do something you wouldn't be able to do without them, right? Maybe without that AFO, you wouldn't be able to walk a far distance or go to the mall or go to the park because it's not safe. Or with the walker, you're not able to be independent in the house. And with it, you are.
No, I just went to Costco for the first time in 15 years. Yeah, I drove. I just got my license last week.
Ah,
And
congrats.
oh yeah, and so I drove to Costco. I went in and I pushed my cart around with one hand, because this I can't, I can't, you know. So but I got it. I got through Costco. It was awesome. I got a couple things. It was really, really cool. But that hasn't happened
Kevin, you
in
rebel.
over 15 years.
Yeah, yeah. And without that AFO, you probably wouldn't be able to because you'd be tripped on
Oh,
yourself.
no, not at
But
all.
if, for instance, it was a goal for you to get rid of it, there are ways to slowly work on that in a safe environment. Like I said, with making things less intense, like we have to meet you where you're at. Let's make the challenge correct so that we're challenging the foot. and you're able to bring it forward. And then there's modifications. It's not AFO, no AFO. It's restrictive AFO, an articulating AFO that has a little bit of movement, a lighter weight AFO, maybe just an ankle brace for some proprioception and some, stability at the ankle, and then maybe no AFO. There's so many different things, and there's different things that work for different people. Like I even have I work with a young kid with cerebral palsy, and he has AFOs, and he hates them because they're freaking heavy. They do help his drop foot, but his legs are really weak. So they're heavy and they limit his ability to walk farther. So he actually likes walking without them. Gets a little toe drag. He knows that he's dragging his feet, but for him, he weighs that risk benefit of I can't walk as far when I have them on. I'd rather not wear them. I'll wear them if I really, really need to, or if I'm having a bad day. So it really is like what we said, different for every single person. So it can be frustrating when you see posts like that, like this is what you have to do. Take everything with a grain of salt. And if you have a therapist, you could even reach out to me. Ralph is a great point person to ask any questions to. What do you think about this for me? I'm having these concerns. And we'd give you the honest truth of, I do think that this would maybe be something good for you or maybe something else, right? Because it could be different for every single person.
I've got a comment about AFOs if I could.
Go for it.
Yeah, I had a stroke 13 years ago, and initially I had one of those L-shaped hard plastic AFOs. I hated it, totally hated it, hurt my foot. And then I got one with a joint in it, hated that, hated that. I mean, it did help me walk, but my foot hurt like hell. Finally, uh, my physiatrist suggested a Dorsey strap. Now, those are not made anymore, but I've still got the one I bought, and I love that. That's something that has got Velcro straps attached to your shoe and a ring around your ankle. And I love that. It doesn't hurt my foot at all. And I know they are not made, but I know that I think Flint Rehab and Sabo make what I would call kinder, gentler AFOs than those plastic things. So not a therapist, uh, but that might be something that gentleman might want to talk to his therapist about, getting something that doesn't hurt your foot and still let you walk. I wear mine with a New Balance shoe. New Balance shoes have got roll bars in them to help keep you from falling over.
Yeah.
Anyway, it just
Yeah, there's just a number of different options. So you never know what could be best for you. And that's the benefit of places like this support group is that you hear about things that have worked or didn't work for other people. And you're like, maybe that's something maybe that I could work with. Either talk to your therapist, look it up yourself. I know we could always Amazon it and then you return it if you don't like it. The beauty of Amazon. So that's
just
really
just one more comment if there's time. Earlier on in your presentation, you talked about the hand being more distal from the brain, and therefore that's the last to recover.
Mhm.
When a young child brain is developing, the development of a child's ability to use his muscles goes in two directions: cephalocaudal, head to foot, and proximodistal, midline to hand.
Mhm.
So it seems like stroke recovery to a certain extent is mimicking the development of the nervous system.
Yeah.
Child learns to use its parts.
Have you ever heard of NDT, neurodevelopmental training?
No.
So that's it's a little more old school, but and it works very well with kids, but it takes that theory of following an injury that recovery does happen in that exact process. So it's using developmental positions like crawling,
Mhm.
sitting transitions, kneeling, and using those before you learn to walk again. However, things change, But there are some wonderful facilitation techniques and things that came out of that NDT training. It's a huge thing in physical therapy, especially in the pediatric population. Very cool.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, we got Dave as his hand raised. I thought it was Kevin. No, Dave, did you have a question?
Up, Dave, I think you're muted.
Yeah.
Up, still can't hear you.
Don't hear you.
Want to type it in the chat? Yeah, go ahead, type it in the chat. Oh, okay, I see.
Okay. He
Okay,
unmuted.
I
I'm
see.
not sure why we don't hear him.
Okay, I got it, Dave. I can message you afterwards. You're on the Facebook group, right? So I can message you afterwards. Okay.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Ralph, is this where will I be able to watch the presentation afterwards?
I record all of these Tuesday
Yeah, I
meetings.
know, but I just can never remember where. Is it on YouTube or?
Yeah, it'll be on my YouTube channel, and I'll post it in all the groups.
Thank
Typically,
you
what
very
I do
much.
is I edit it. I go back to the announcements, and instead of deleting them, I put it on. People find the announcements weeks later, the promotion. So I put the
Yeah.
link onto the 2 times that I promote the meeting, and then I usually post it in the groups just all by itself, and then they're available on my YouTube channel for forever.
Thank you.
And
Thank you, Ralph.
if we don't have any more questions, I'll wrap this up just a little bit well, and you can ask a question after this, but anybody out there in here watching now or in YouTube land, watching this later, I typically also, in the description underneath the video, I put, I'll put all Dr. Amadeo's, contact information, whatever. If you want to reach out to her, then any contact information or links or resources or anything that she would like to see there, I make sure that it's there. I don't think people are aware of that. So I'm trying to make people aware of the fact that in all of these presentations that are recorded, that there's sometimes additional resources, and there's certainly contact information for the person that we talk to. And Kevin was earlier making a really valid point for one of your points, and that's individualized treatment, because everything's different. So, he needs to listen to his therapist, and in terms of his AFO. The other thing I was going to say was that what Dr. Hetzler said, Sabo and Flint both have a kind of a Dorset tab thing that's works off of strings, or Flint's works off strings. I think Sabo's a little strappy type thing. Anyway, they can be useful for somebody who's trying to progress away from an AFO, which isn't always possible and needs to be done in some kind of safe way. And if you got a whole bunch of big time ankle roll, you're going to really have to deal with that before you can do anything much safely. So, anybody?
Ralph, I just wanted to mention that Debbie did ask a question in the chat asking, are there any visualization exercises like in a podcast that you know of? I'm not sure have you had any podcasts recently or in the past of anyone talking about visualization exercises?
Well, I mean, we've talked about mental imagery and visualization. I think that there's some, I think I know of some. Dr. Hetzler made me aware of them. Peter Levine wrote Stronger After Stroke, and he has some visualization exercises that he unfortunately passed away a couple years ago. And they're on his website, and actually they're being hosted by Flint Rehab. Anybody else got anything else? if not, I'm going to thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to educate us.
Very, very welcome.
We definitely appreciate it. And like I
Thank
said,
you,
for
Samantha.
anybody here or anybody out there in YouTube land, there's right underneath the video, it has like, they used to put a couple, like a paragraph. I wish they'd continue to do that. They only have a couple words and it says ... more. And you click the ... more and it'll bring up a whole big long thing of all the stuff that I put underneath all these videos. I'm trying to get people used to the idea that there's resources under the video. So look under the video and thank you, thank you, thank you.
You're very welcome. You could always, everyone, you could always reach out to me on the Facebook group. I have both my practice page, which is like just like a page, but then my personal is Samantha Amadeo. So you could look me up on there and just send me a direct message there if you have any questions at all, and we can connect there.
Thank you.
And yeah, you're very, very welcome. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. We'll have to plan another one again about something else.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so very much.
Definitely love.
Thank you,
Very
thank
welcome.
you.
Thanks.
Do all you can with what you have, in the time you have, in the place you are. Do all you can. Do all you can.